The war was going badly. Every soldier on Tertius Prime could feel it, even those who didn't see the classified reports. Ships returned damaged, casualties increased. The Velkari were winning. In the command center, General Vector stood before a holographic map showing the battle zones. Red dots marked Velkari victories. There were too many red dots. Blue dots showed coalition positions, but they kept shrinking, retreating, disappearing. "They're learning from every engagement," said Commander Wren, a cybernetic being whose brain was half computer. "Their tactical AI adapts to our strategies within minutes. We used Formation Delta 7 in the last battle. It worked initially, then their AI countered it. By the end of the battle, they were predicting our moves before we made them." "What about Formation Gamma 2? Vector asked. "We tried it 3 days ago. Same result. Initial success, then adaptation, then defeat." Wren displayed data streams. "Their AI is learning exponentially. Every battle makes them smarter. Meanwhile, we're using the same tactics that worked for 1,000 years. Those tactics maintained peace for 1,000 years. Against enemies who also followed predictable patterns. The Velkari AI doesn't follow patterns. It creates them, tests them, and evolves them faster than we can respond." Vector's forearms crossed in frustration. Around the table, commanders from a dozen species looked equally defeated. They had the numbers. They had the weapons. They had the courage. But they were losing anyway. "We need new strategies," said Commander Wen, a human who led Earth's space fleet. "Everything we try fails because we're thinking like generals. We need to think like guerrillas." "Guerrilla tactics are for weaker forces," another commander objected. "We have superior numbers." "And we're still losing," Wen shot back. "The Velkari AI expects us to use our numbers in conventional ways. What if we did something it doesn't expect, such as silence?" Nobody had an answer. Meanwhile, Hajun continued his sanitation duties. He had been on Tertius Prime for 6 weeks now. Every day he cleaned. Every day he observed. He saw the fear growing. He saw the confidence crumbling. He saw an army that didn't know how to win anymore. Yuna visited him often now. She would sit in the mess hall while he worked, discussing what she observed in intelligence reports. She had become convinced that Hajun's perspective was exactly what the coalition needed. "They're holding a strategy meeting tomorrow," she told him one evening. "All the top commanders will be there. Every idea they've tried has failed." Hajun wiped down a table. "They'll figure something out, will they? They're all trained the same way, think the same way. They're trying to outcompute an AI with better computers. It's like playing chess against a machine that calculates 1,000,000 moves ahead. So you don't play chess. You flip the board." Yuna leaned forward. "What does that mean?" "Doyen used to say that when you can't win by the rules, you change the game. The Velkari AI is built to predict rational military decisions, so you make irrational ones. That's..." Yuna paused. "That's actually brilliant. Why aren't you in that strategy meeting?" "Because I'm a janitor who wears sandals. Nobody's going to listen to me." "They should." Hajun smiled slightly. "Should isn't the same as will." But Yuna had an idea. She had clearance to attend the strategy meeting as an intelligence observer, and she had a recording device. If Hajun wouldn't go to the meeting, maybe she could bring his ideas there instead. The next day, the strategy meeting convened. The command center was filled with the coalition's best minds. Generals, admirals, tactical specialists, AI consultants, and cybernetic strategists. They had analyzed every battle, run countless simulations, and tested hundreds of strategies. All of them had failed. "We're losing because we're predictable," Commander Wren explained, displaying complex data. "The Velkari AI recognizes patterns. Once it identifies our pattern, it counters it. We need something completely different." "Different how?" Vector demanded. "I don't know. That's the problem. We're all trained in the same military academies, using the same historical battles as examples. We think alike." General Vector looked around the room. "Does anyone have a genuinely new idea?" Silence. Then Yuna stood up. She was junior in rank, and intelligence officers rarely spoke in strategy meetings. Every head turned toward her. "Sir, I may have an idea, or rather someone else's idea that I'd like to present." "Speak," Vector said. "What if we stopped trying to be more logical than the Velkari AI? What if we became less logical instead?" Confusion rippled through the room. "Explain," Vector commanded. "The Velkari AI predicts our moves because our moves follow military logic. We attack strategic targets. We defend critical positions. We use formations that maximize our advantages. All of this makes sense, which means all of it can be predicted. You're suggesting we make decisions that don't make sense? Commander Wen asked. I'm suggesting we make decisions the AI can't predict because they're based on factors it doesn't account for. Emotion, intuition, cultural references, random chance. Things that are uniquely organic. That sounds like chaos, another commander said. Exactly. Controlled chaos. The Velkari AI is designed to find patterns in logic. But humans and many other species here don't always operate on pure logic. We make gut decisions. We take risks based on feelings. We do things that seem irrational but work out anyway. Commander Wren's cybernetic eyes flickered. The mathematics are interesting. An AI trained on logical military doctrine would struggle with genuine randomness, but implementing controlled irrationality is extremely difficult. You could just as easily defeat yourself, unless you have someone experienced in unconventional tactics, Yuna said carefully. Someone who has already proven that irregular strategies can defeat superior forces. Vector's eyes narrowed. Who are you talking about? Yuna took a breath. This was the risk. Hajun, the human assigned to sanitation. The room erupted. Several commanders laughed. Others looked offended that a junior officer would waste their time like this. Vector's expression darkened. The human who refuses to wear armor? Who treats military service like a casual job? That Hajun? Yes, sir. But you should know his background. 5 years ago, he was part of Operation Phantom Thread. That got attention. Several commanders stopped talking. Operation Phantom Thread was legendary in certain circles. A small team defeating an entire pirate armada through psychological warfare and guerrilla tactics. He served under Commander Doyen. Yuna continued. He helped develop the tactics that won that operation. Tactics that no AI could have predicted because they weren't based on standard military doctrine. If he's so brilliant, why is he cleaning toilets? Someone asked. Because he didn't fit your expectations, sir. He showed up in sandals, so you judged him as non-serious. But maybe that's exactly the kind of thinking we need. Someone who doesn't care about looking like a soldier, only about being effective. Vector considered this. His pride was wounded by the implication that he had made a mistake. But his responsibility to the coalition was greater than his pride. Bring him here. 20 minutes later, Hajun entered the command center. He was still in his simple clothes and sandals. His hair was slightly messy. He carried a cleaning rag in one hand because Yuna had pulled him directly from work. Compared to the armored and decorated commanders around the table, he looked completely out of place. But he walked with quiet confidence and stood at attention. You sent for me, sir? Vector studied him. Officer Yuna tells me you have experience with unconventional tactics. I have some experience, yes, sir. The coalition is losing this war. Our traditional strategies fail because the Velkari AI adapts to them. Do you have any suggestions? Hajun looked at the holographic map showing the battle zones. He studied it for a full minute while everyone waited. Finally, he spoke. You're fighting the wrong war, sir. Explain. You're trying to outthink an AI. You can't. It processes information faster than any organic mind. But AI has a weakness. It needs data to function. It needs patterns to analyze. If you give it no pattern, it has nothing to work with. Randomness alone isn't enough, Commander Wren interjected. We'd be defeating ourselves. Not randomness. Organized chaos. You need to make decisions based on factors the AI can't quantify. Use tactics that seem illogical but are driven by human instinct, emotion, and cultural knowledge. Attack targets that have symbolic value but no strategic value. Retreat from strong positions to create confusion. Use old weapons mixed with new ones. Fight battles that make no sense on paper but make perfect sense to organic minds. The room was silent. It sounded crazy, but it also sounded like it might work. Lieutenant Minho, who had been standing near the back, spoke up. I've served alongside this man. When our transport was attacked, his solution saved us. It wasn't in any manual. It was pure improvisation based on understanding how the enemy thought. Commander Wen nodded slowly. In Earth's history, we have many examples of smaller forces defeating larger ones through unorthodox tactics. Guerrilla warfare, psychological operations, making the enemy fight on our terms instead of theirs. This is highly irregular, another commander protested. So is losing every battle, Vector said flatly. He looked at Hajun. If we implement these tactics, would you lead the operation? In sandals? Someone muttered. 2 weeks passed on Tertius Prime. Hajun cleaned floors, emptied waste containers, and maintained the facilities while other soldiers trained for war. He worked quietly, speaking only when necessary, watching everything. The other humans avoided him. They were embarrassed by his presence, ashamed that one of their own had been reduced to cleaning duty. Lieutenant Minho tried to speak with him once, offering to requisition proper gear if Hajun would just follow regulations. Hajun politely declined. But someone was watching him carefully. Her name was Yuna, and she worked in intelligence. She had sharp eyes that missed nothing and a mind that questioned everything. She noticed that the strange human in sandals wasn't cleaning randomly. He moved through the base with purpose, observing patterns, studying behaviors. When Hajun cleaned the command center, he paid attention to how orders were given. When he cleaned the training grounds, he watched how different species fought. When he cleaned the mess hall, he listened to conversations. He was learning the coalition from the ground up, seeing things that generals in their offices never saw. On the 15th day, the orders came. The coalition fleet was moving out. The Velkari had attacked a mining colony in the Kronos Nebula, and the coalition was sending ships to defend it. Every soldier was mobilized, including support personnel. Hajun was assigned to a supply transport called the Steady Wing. It was an unglamorous ship that carried food, ammunition, and equipment to the battle zone. The crew consisted of 20 beings from different species, plus a security detail of 10 soldiers. The security chief was a Dralthi warrior named Krev. He had 2 arms instead of 4, which apparently meant lower status among his people. When he saw Hajun boarding in sandals and casual clothes, he laughed. "What is this? Did they send us a passenger by mistake?" "I'm assigned to this transport," Hajun said, showing his orders. "A janitor." Krev read the assignment and laughed harder. "Perfect. You can clean up when we spill food during the flight." The other security soldiers joined in the laughter. Hajun simply found a seat and sat down. The transport launched an hour later, joining a massive fleet of hundreds of ships. Through the windows, Hajun could see warships, carriers, and support vessels all heading toward the nebula. The flight would take 3 days. During that time, Hajun continued his observations. He noticed that the security detail was nervous. They checked their weapons constantly. They talked too much, trying to cover their fear with bravado. They had never seen real combat before. Krev was the most nervous of all. He spent hours reviewing tactical manuals on his datapad, memorizing standard responses to different scenarios. Everything by the book, everything predictable. On the 3rd day, they entered the Kronos Nebula. Space turned purple and black, filled with gas clouds that interfered with sensors. Visibility was limited. Communication became difficult. The fleet spread out, each ship following its assigned course. Then the attack came. The Velkari had hidden raiders in the nebula. 3 fast ships appeared out of the gas clouds, targeting the supply transports. They knew the coalition tactics. The warships would protect the supply line, while the transports ran. Standard procedure. But the Velkari were faster than expected. One raider locked onto the Steady Wing and fired. The ship shook violently. Alarms screamed. Red lights flashed everywhere. "Battle stations," Krev shouted. "Security detail, defensive positions." The security soldiers scrambled to their posts, weapons ready. But they were inside a transport ship with limited weapons. Against a dedicated raider, they had little chance. The Velkari ship fired again, and the Steady Wing's shields flickered. "We're losing power," the pilot shouted. "Shields at 30%. Krev frantically checked his datapad, looking for the proper response procedure. His hands were shaking. "Standard defensive formation. Return fire with available weapons." The transport's small guns fired back, but they were meant for deterrence, not real combat. The Velkari raider dodged easily and came around for another pass. Hajun stood up and walked to the cockpit. Krev saw him and yelled, "Get back to your seat, this is a combat situation." "I know," Hajun said calmly. He looked at the pilot. "Can you vent atmosphere from the cargo hold?" The pilot, a floating being made of what looked like water, stared at him. "What? Why? Can you do it, yes or no?" "Yes, but do it. Then turn off all external lights and power down to minimum." Krev pushed between them. "You have no authority here. I'm the security chief." Hajun ignored him and spoke directly to the pilot. "That raider is using heat sensors to track us through the nebula. Their visual sensors can't work well here. If we vent atmosphere, it will create a heat cloud. If we power down, we'll become invisible to their sensors. But you have to do it now." The pilot looked at Krev, uncertain. The ship shook again from another hit. Shields at 15%. "Do it!" Krev finally shouted, realizing they were out of options. The pilot activated the venting system. Atmosphere rushed out of the cargo hold, creating a massive cloud of gas that glowed with heat in the cold of space. At the same time, all non-essential systems powered down. The transport went dark and quiet. Through the window, they watched the Velkari raider circle the heat cloud, confused. Its sensors were telling it the transport was everywhere and nowhere. It fired randomly into the cloud, missing completely. "Now what?" Krev whispered. "Now we wait," Hajun said. "They'll waste ammunition on the cloud, then move on to easier targets. But we're helpless. If they find us, they won't look for something they think is already dead." It took 10 minutes. The longest 10 minutes of everyone's lives. The raider circled twice, fired several more times into the cloud, then accelerated away toward other transports. The crew of the steady wing held their breath until the raider disappeared into the nebula. Only then did they restart the main systems. Lights came back on. The engines hummed to life. They were damaged but functional. They were alive. Krev stared at Hajun with a mixture of confusion and respect. "How did you know that would work?" "The Velkari use advanced sensors. Advanced sensors have limitations. Too much information can blind them, just like too little." Hajun returned to his seat. "You should report the damage and request escort back to the fleet." The pilot sent the distress signal. Within an hour, 2 coalition fighters arrived to escort them to safety. The steady wing limped back to the main fleet, battered but intact. When they docked, military investigators came aboard to document what happened. They interviewed everyone. When they got to Hajun's part of the story, Krev took credit for the idea. "I ordered the atmosphere vent and power down," Krev told the investigators. "Standard evasion tactics for this situation." Hajun said nothing to contradict him. It didn't matter who got credit. What mattered was that people survived. But someone had noticed the truth. Yuna had reviewed the ship's communication logs and internal recordings. She saw everything that really happened, and it made her curious. She started digging into Hajun's service record. Most of it was classified, but she had high-level intelligence clearance. What she found amazed her. 5 years ago, Operation Phantom Thread had been humanity's most successful black operations mission. A pirate armada had been terrorizing the outer colonies, killing thousands. Normal military tactics failed against them because the pirates were unpredictable and ruthless. So Earth sent a special team, only 12 people led by Commander Doyen. They didn't fight the pirates head-on. They used psychology, guerrilla tactics, and unconventional strategies. They made the pirates paranoid, turned them against each other, and destroyed their fleet from the inside. It worked perfectly. Until the final assault. The pirates realized too late what was happening and set a trap. Commander Doyen knew it was a trap, but his team was already inside. He could have retreated, but that would have meant abandoning his people. So he stayed. He drew all the enemy fire to himself, giving his team time to escape. Doyen died, but everyone else lived, including Hajun, who had been Doyen's second in command. The mission report said Hajun had received the commander's insignia and full honors. Then he resigned. No explanation. Just left the military and disappeared to a remote island. Now Yuna understood. Hajun carried guilt. He carried the memory of his commander's sacrifice. And he carried the belief that fancy equipment and standard tactics hadn't saved Doyen. So why wear them now? She found Hajun in the mess hall late one night. He was cleaning tables, working alone in the quiet space. She sat down at one of the tables he had just cleaned. "You saved that transport," she said directly. "Why did you let Krev take credit?" Hajun continued, wiping down the next table. "He's the security chief. He's responsible for his crew. He'll do better next time because he thinks he succeeded." "That's remarkably humble." It's practical. Yuna watched him work. I read about Operation Phantom Thread. I know who you are. Hajun paused, then continued cleaning. That was 5 years ago. Doyen was a brilliant commander. His tactics are still studied in military academies. Yes, he was brilliant. Why did you quit after he died? Hajun stopped cleaning and looked at her directly. His eyes held old pain, carefully controlled. Because I learned that being brilliant isn't enough. Doyen followed every rule, wore the best armor, used the best weapons. He did everything right, and he still died. The transport ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a jolt that made everyone grab onto something stable. Through the windows, Hajun could see Tertius Prime for the first time. The moon was huge, gray and rocky, covered with thousands of buildings and landing pads. Ships were everywhere, coming and going like insects around a hive. Hajun stood near the back of the transport, watching quietly. Around him, dozens of other soldiers talked nervously. Most were young, excited, scared. They wore their new uniforms proudly. Their armor was polished. Their weapons were checked and rechecked. They looked like soldiers from the recruitment posters. Then there was Hajun. He wore a simple gray shirt and loose brown pants. His feet were covered by old leather sandals. The only military item he carried was the commander's insignia pinned over his heart. He had no bags, no weapons, no armor. Just himself and Doyen's badge. Some of the other soldiers stared at him. A few whispered to each other, pointing. One young soldier, barely 20 years old, approached him nervously. Excuse me, sir. I think you might be on the wrong transport. This one is for coalition military personnel. Hajun looked at the young man and smiled slightly. I'm in the right place, but you're not wearing a uniform. No, I'm not. The young soldier didn't know what to say to that. He walked back to his friends and they all whispered more intensely. Hajun didn't mind. He had expected this. The transport landed on one of the massive pads. The doors opened and soldiers began filing out. Hajun walked out last, squinting in the bright artificial lights. The air smelled metallic and recycled. Everywhere he looked, there were soldiers from species he had never seen before. Tall beings with 4 arms and blue skin. Small creatures that floated instead of walking. Things that looked like living rocks. Things that seemed to be made of light. Hundreds of different species, all gathered here to fight the Velkari Empire. And all of them were wearing armor. A human officer was waiting at the landing pad with a datapad. Lieutenant Minho, according to his name badge. He was young but carried himself with confidence. He looked at the arriving soldiers, checking them off his list. When he saw Hajun, he stopped. Name? Minho asked, staring at Hajun's clothes. Hajun. Minho checked his datapad. His eyes widened slightly. You're the Special Operations veteran? Former veteran, yes. Where's your gear? I don't need it. Minho's jaw tightened. He clearly wanted to say something, but held back. Follow me. You'll be processed with the others. The processing center was enormous. Thousands of soldiers moved through different stations, getting assigned to units, receiving equipment, and learning the base layout. Hajun moved through the lines quietly, answering questions when asked. Accepting the basic items they gave him, a communicator, an ID badge, a meal card. When they tried to issue him armor and weapons, he refused them. The supply officer argued with him for 10 minutes before finally giving up and marking his file as non-compliant. After processing, all the human soldiers were gathered in a briefing room. Lieutenant Minho stood at the front addressing them. Welcome to Tertius Prime. You're now part of the Coalition Defense Force. Tomorrow you'll meet soldiers from other species and begin training. You represent Earth here. You represent humanity. I expect all of you to act professionally and follow regulations. His eyes moved to Hajun for just a moment. All regulations. After the briefing, the soldiers were dismissed. Several of them approached Hajun as he walked toward the barracks. What's your problem? One soldier asked. His name tag said Quan. You're making us all look bad. I'm following my orders, Hajun said calmly. I reported for duty. You look like you're going to the beach, not to war. The aliens already think humans are weak. You're proving them right. Hajun stopped walking and turned to face Quan. The young soldier was taller and more muscular, wearing his armor proudly. But when Hajun looked at him, really looked at him, Quan took a step back without meaning to. What did they tell you about me? Hajun asked quietly. That you used to be special operations. That you quit 5 years ago. Did they tell you why I quit? Quan shook his head. Then maybe you should worry about your own gear and let me worry about mine. Hajun continued walking. The barracks were divided by species. Humans had their own section, which was both practical and isolating. Hajun found an empty bunk in the corner and sat down. He didn't unpack because he had nothing to unpack. He simply sat there thinking. The next morning, all soldiers were ordered to report to the main training ground. It was a massive open area where thousands of beings gathered. Hajun walked there in his sandals, feeling the cold metal floor under his feet. He saw immediately that the coalition wasn't just big. It was overwhelming. Species he couldn't even name stood in perfect formations. Their armor was advanced, their weapons were powerful, and their discipline was impressive. Flags and banners from 100 worlds hung in the air. At the center of it all stood General Vector, the Dralti commander in charge of this base. He was massive, with 4 powerful arms and skin that looked like polished stone. His voice boomed across the training ground without any amplification needed. Soldiers of the Coalition, you have been called here to defend our galaxy against the Valkyrie threat. You will train together. You will fight together. And some of you will die together. But those who survive will have earned the greatest honor any warrior can claim. You will have defended civilization itself. The speech continued for several minutes. Vector spoke about duty, honor, and sacrifice. He spoke about the terrible power of the Valkyrie Empire and the importance of unity. His words were meant to inspire courage, but when he finished, his eyes scanned the assembled soldiers. They stopped when he saw Hajun, a human in sandals and casual clothes standing among warriors in full battle armor. You there, Vector's voice carried across the field. Human in the inappropriate clothing, step forward. Hajun walked forward calmly, his sandals making soft sounds on the metal ground. Thousands of eyes watched him. He stopped in front of the general and stood at attention. What is your name, soldier? Hajun, sir. Where is your armor, Hajun? I didn't bring any, sir. A murmur went through the crowd. Vector's forearms crossed. You think war is a joke? You think you can face the Valkyrie in sandals? I think I can do whatever is needed, sir. Confidence is good. Stupidity is deadly. Vector leaned down, bringing his massive head closer to Hajun. I have read reports about human arrogance. I did not believe them until now. You insult every soldier here by treating this like a casual event. Hajun didn't respond. He simply stood there, meeting the general's eyes without fear or defiance. Just calm acceptance, you are reassigned, Vector announced. You will work in sanitation. You will clean the barracks, the mess halls, and the training areas. Perhaps that will teach you the proper respect for military service. Dismissed. Hajun saluted and walked away. Behind him, he could hear laughter from some of the alien soldiers. He could feel the embarrassment radiating from the other humans. Lieutenant Minho looked like he wanted to disappear, but Hajun felt nothing but calm. He had expected this. Doyen had taught him long ago that appearances mattered to people who didn't know better. Real warriors looked past the surface. He spent the rest of the day receiving his new assignment. Sanitation duty meant he would clean the common areas, dispose of waste, and maintain facilities. It was the lowest job on the base, usually given to machines or as punishment for serious violations. The sanitation supervisor, a small alien who looked like a walking plant, gave him the basic tools, cleaning solutions, brushes, containers. The plant being seemed sympathetic. You angered the general on your first day. That is not wise. I didn't mean to anger him, Hajun said. I just didn't meet his expectations. The general has very specific expectations. You would have been better off conforming. Hajun began his work in the mess hall, a huge space where thousands of soldiers ate. The floor was dirty from countless feet and boots and other appendages. He worked slowly and carefully, watching everything around him. And that's when he began to really see the coalition for what it was. He noticed how the different species grouped together, rarely mixing. He saw how the soldiers relied heavily on their technology and armor, treating it like a shield against reality. He observed their training methods, rigid, predictable, focused on formations and standard tactics. Most importantly, he noticed their fear. It was subtle, hidden under layers of bravado and discipline, but it was there. They were scared of the Valkyrie. They were scared of dying. They were scared of failing. Fear made people predictable, and predictable soldiers were vulnerable soldiers. Hajun continued cleaning, but his mind was working. Doyen had taught him to observe first, understand second, and act third. He was still in the observation phase. He would watch and learn, and when the time came he would be ready, even if he had to do it in sandals. The message arrived on a cold morning when the sky was still dark. Captain Taman stood in the command center of Horizon 7, Earth's largest military station floating in orbit. His hands shook slightly as he read the text on the screen. The Galactic Council had sent an emergency order to every planet, every species, every military force in the known universe. War was coming. The Velkari Empire had broken an ancient peace treaty. For 1,000 years, the galaxy had enjoyed relative calm. Now the Velkari wanted more territory, more resources, more power. They were moving through the outer systems like a storm, destroying everything in their path. The Council needed soldiers. Every species had to send fighters to join the Coalition Defense Force. Taman scrolled through the list of names. Earth had to contribute 500 soldiers. The computer had already selected them based on experience, skills, and combat records. Most were active military personnel, but some names on the list surprised him. One name made him stop completely. Hajun Taman remembered that name. Everyone in Earth's military remembered that name. Hajun had been a legend 5 years ago. He led special operations that nobody else could complete. He went into impossible situations and came back alive. He saved countless lives. But then something happened on his last mission and Hajun resigned. He disappeared from military life completely. "Sir, should we send the notices?" asked Lieutenant Byung standing nearby. Taman nodded slowly. "Yes, send them all. Including this one." He pointed at Hajun's name on the screen. Byung looked at the name and his eyes widened. "Sir, are you sure? He's been gone for 5 years. And the last mission?" "The report said." "I know what the report said," Taman interrupted. "But the computer selected him. The Council needs experienced soldiers. Send the notice." 3 days later, 2 military officers landed on a small island in the Pacific Ocean. The island had no cities, no bases, no technology centers. Just a small village where a few hundred people lived simple lives. They fished, they grew food, they lived in peace. The officers found Hajun near the beach. He was working on his fishing nets, his hands moving quickly as he repaired the torn sections. He wore simple clothes, a loose shirt and old pants. His feet were bare. His hair was longer than military regulations allowed. He looked nothing like the soldier from the old photos. "Hajun?" one officer called out. The man looked up. His face was calm, peaceful even. He had the kind of face that had seen too much but chose to smile anyway. "Yes? We're from Earth Defense Command. We have orders for you." Hajun stood up slowly, brushing sand from his hands. "I left the military 5 years ago. The Galactic Council has issued an emergency draft. All former Special Operations personnel are being called back to service. You've been selected." The second officer held out a tablet. Hajun took it and read the message carefully. His expression didn't change. He read every word, taking his time. The officers waited, growing more nervous with each passing minute. Finally, Hajun handed back the tablet. "When do I need to report?" 3 days. You'll be transported to Tertius Prime, the Coalition staging ground. Here's your uniform and equipment." The first officer handed him a large case, full combat armor, weapons authorization, and standard field kit. "Everything you need." Hajun took the case and set it down on the sand. He opened it and looked at the contents. The black combat uniform was folded perfectly. The armor plates gleamed in the sunlight. Everything was new, top quality, prepared for war. He closed the case without touching anything inside. "I'll report in 3 days," Hajun said, "but I won't be wearing this." The officers looked at each other in confusion. "Sir, regulations require full combat gear. You can't go to war without proper equipment. You said I've been drafted. You ordered me to report for duty. You didn't order me to wear a costume." Hajun turned and walked toward his small house near the beach. "Wait here." The officers stood on the beach, completely confused. They had delivered draft notices to 40 former soldiers in the past week. None of them had refused their equipment. This was highly irregular. Hajun returned a few minutes later. He carried a small metal box in his hands. The box was old, scratched, and worn. He opened it carefully as if it contained something precious. Inside was a single item, a military insignia. It was the rank badge of a commander, made of silver metal with Earth symbol engraved on it. "This belonged to Commander Doyen," Hajun said quietly. "He was my commanding officer. He led Operation Phantom Thread 5 years ago. He saved my entire team. He died doing it." The officers knew about Operation Phantom Thread. It was classified, but everyone had heard stories. A small human team had destroyed an entire pirate fleet using tactics that seemed impossible. But the commander had died in the final assault. Hajun pinned the insignia to his shirt right over his heart. "I'll wear this. Nothing else." "Sir, you can't be serious," the first officer said. "You'll be fighting alongside soldiers from dozens of species. They'll all be wearing advanced armor. You'll look like what?" Hajun asked calmly. "Like you're not taking this seriously. Like you don't respect the mission." Hajun looked at the officer for a long moment. His eyes held something the officer couldn't quite understand. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride. It was something deeper, something earned through experience. "Doyen taught me that a real soldier doesn't need to look dangerous," Hajun said. "He needs to be necessary. I'll report for duty in 3 days. I'll do whatever the coalition needs, but I'll do it my way. What about boots? At least wear proper boots." Hajun glanced down at his bare feet, then at his house. "I have sandals." "That's enough." The second officer tried one more time. "Commander Hajun, please reconsider. The other species will judge humanity by what they see. If you show up looking like a civilian, they'll think humans aren't serious about this war. Let them think what they want," Hajun said. He picked up his fishing nets again. "I'll be there in 3 days. You have my word." The officers realized they couldn't change his mind. They took off in their aircraft, leaving Hajun alone on the beach. They would report this incident to Captain Taman. He would have to deal with it. Hajun watched the aircraft disappear into the sky. Then he returned to his nets, his hands working automatically while his mind drifted to memories. He thought about Doyun, about Operation Phantom Thread, about the choices that led him to this quiet island. The war was coming whether he wanted it or not. The galaxy needed soldiers. The galaxy needed fighters. But Hajun had learned something important 5 years ago, something Doyen had taught him with his final breath. War wasn't about looking ready. It wasn't about armor or weapons or impressive displays. War was about being ready when everything went wrong. It was about staying calm when others panicked. It was about making the hard choices that nobody else wanted to make. Doyen had made those choices. He had worn the finest armor, carried the best weapons, and followed every regulation. But in the end, what saved the team wasn't his equipment. It was his mind, his spirit, his willingness to sacrifice everything for his people. Hajun touched the insignia on his chest. It was cool against his skin, a constant reminder of what really mattered. In 3 days, he would report for duty. He would board a transport ship and travel to a moon he'd never seen before. He would meet soldiers from species he'd never heard of. They would look at him and judge him. They would see his simple clothes and bare feet and think he was weak. That was fine. Hajun had learned that underestimation was a weapon too. Let them think he wasn't serious. Let them think he wasn't ready. He would show them what a real soldier looked like when the time came. The sun rose higher over the ocean. Hajun finished repairing his nets and carried them to his boat. He had 3 more days of peace. 3 more days of simple life. He intended to use them well because after that everything would change. Truth presented as mystery. The Velkari will spend weeks analyzing our cultural data. Trying to find secrets that definding volunteers was exactly as hard as Hajun expected. Most soldiers laughed when they heard his plan. The idea of fighting without following standard procedures seemed insane to beings who had trained their entire lives in military discipline. But some people understood. Lieutenant Minho was the first to volunteer. "I saw what you did on the transport. I want to learn how to think like that." Yuna volunteered next. "Intelligence is about understanding patterns. You're teaching us to break patterns. I need to see how that works." Others slowly joined. A young pilot named Insu, who had been reprimanded for improvising during a battle, a communications officer named Yejin, who was bored with standard protocols, a medic named Jiwon who believed medicine was as much art as science. From other species, volunteers came for different reasons. Tail, a warrior who had lost 3 battles following orders and wanted to try something new. Quinn, an engineer who liked solving impossible problems. Mora, a scout who had always relied on instinct more than sensors. Within 3 days, Hajun had a team of 15 volunteers. They gathered in an unused training room away from the main base where others wouldn't see them. This is going to feel wrong, Hajun told them on the first day. Everything you learned about military tactics will tell you we're making mistakes. But we're not making mistakes. We're making choices the enemy can't predict. How do we know what they can't predict? Thal asked. We don't, that's the point. If we're confused about what we're doing, imagine how confused they'll be. He started with simple exercises. Thal, if you were attacking an enemy base, where would you strike first? The power generator. Cut their power and all their systems fail. Correct. That's what any good soldier would do. So that's what the Valkyrie AI expects. Instead, you're going to attack their water recycling system. But that's not strategic. It won't affect their fighting capability immediately. Exactly. It makes no tactical sense, which means their AI won't anticipate it. While they're trying to understand why you attacked their water system, you'll hit something else. Keep them reacting instead of predicting. They trained for 12 hours a day. Hajun taught them to mix old tactics with new ones. Use swords alongside plasma rifles. Send messages by hand instead of by secure channels. Fight battles that serve no strategic purpose except to create confusion. The Valkyrie AI learns from success and failure, Hajun explained. If we give it neither, if we do things that don't fit into win or lose categories, we break its learning model. This is insane, Insu said one day, exhausted from training. Yes, Hajun agreed. That's exactly right. On the 7th day, General Vector summoned Hajun to the command center. Your test operation is approved. The Valkyrie have established a forward base on the asteroid designated Rock 7. It's heavily defended, and we've failed to take it twice. Intelligence says it's being used to coordinate attacks on our supply lines. Hajun studied the tactical map. The asteroid was small but fortified. 3 approach vectors, all covered by defensive weapons. A standard assault would require significant forces and would likely fail like the previous 2 attempts. How many ships can I have? Hajun asked. 1 small transport. Your 15 volunteers. Nothing more. If this operation fails, I don't want to lose important resources. Hajun smiled slightly. Understood, sir. We'll leave immediately. The transport, which Hajun named the Dancing Fool for reasons he didn't explain, left Tertius Prime 6 hours later. His team sat in the cargo area, checking equipment that seemed randomly chosen. Some had standard armor. Others wore light clothing. Some carried advanced weapons. Others had simple blades. Explain the plan again, Minho asked. We're going to knock on their front door, Hajun said. That's suicide. Only if we were actually attacking. We're not. We're creating a question mark. The transport approached Rock 7 slowly, broadcasting civilian identification codes mixed with military distress signals. The Valkyrie sensors picked them up immediately. Their AI analyzed the contradictory signals and couldn't categorize them properly. Was it a civilian ship in distress? A military trap? A malfunction? The AI did what all AIs do when facing incomplete data. It requested more information. It didn't fire. It waited. Hajun piloted the transport directly toward the main hangar, broadcasting surrender codes. The Valkyrie defenders were paralyzed by confusion. Their AI was still analyzing. Its combat protocol said to destroy enemy ships, but its logic protocol said to gather more data when facing uncertainty. The transport landed in the hangar before the AI finished its analysis. Now, Hajun said calmly. His team poured out of the transport, not shooting but running in different directions carrying strange equipment. Hajin set up a broadcasting station and started transmitting music, human music mixed with alien songs at random volumes. The Valkyrie communication system tried to filter it as noise, but the varying frequencies caused interference. Quinn and Thal ran to the power systems, but instead of destroying them, they reprogrammed the lights to flash in patterns that spelled out poetry in several languages. The Valkyrie AI tried to analyze the patterns for hidden codes. There were none. It was just poetry. Mora and Jiwan released smoke bombs filled with harmless but aromatic gases that confused the chemical sensors. The AI registered biological agents but couldn't classify them as weapons or not. Meanwhile, Hajun walked directly to the command center, unarmed, still in his sandals, carrying only a datapad. The automated defenses tracked him but didn't fire. He wasn't behaving like an enemy. He wasn't behaving like anything the AI understood. Inside the command center, Velkhari soldiers stood in confusion as their computer system struggled to process what was happening. Every sensor reported something different. Every analysis produced contradictory results. The AI was drowning in meaningless data. Hajun connected his datapad to their network and uploaded something. The complete works of human literature, art, music, and cultural history. Millions of files. None of them military, none of them strategic, just culture. The Velkhari AI tried to analyze it all, searching for hidden meanings, coded messages, strategic information. It allocated more processing power, then more, trying to find patterns in human creativity that followed no logical pattern. While the AI was distracted, Minho's team placed small explosive charges on the asteroid's structural weak points. Not on weapons or defenses, but on the rock itself. 20 minutes after landing, Hajun's team was back on the transport. They took off, heading back toward Coalition space. Behind them, the Velkhari base was in chaos. Nothing was destroyed. Nobody was killed. But the AI was completely confused, still trying to analyze poetry and music and art. Now, Hajun said quietly. Minho triggered the charges. They were small, carefully placed. They didn't destroy the base. They cracked the asteroid, created stress fractures throughout the rock. The base was still functional, but now it was structurally unstable. Any heavy vibration, any significant weapon fire would cause it to break apart. The Velkhari realized this too late. They couldn't use their own heavy weapons without destroying the asteroid they stood on. They couldn't bring in reinforcements because the hangar was damaged. They couldn't coordinate effectively because their AI was still processing the cultural data dump. 3 hours later, Coalition forces arrived and found the Velkhari abandoning the base. They surrendered without a fight because their position had become untenable. The Coalition took Rock 7 without losing a single soldier. Back on Tertius Prime, General Vector stared at the mission report in disbelief. You uploaded poetry and music and art and historical records, Hajun confirmed. Their AI tried to analyze it all, looking for military intelligence that wasn't there. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Yes, sir. That's why it worked. Commander Wren had reviewed the data carefully. The Velkhari AI allocated 60% of its processing power trying to decrypt cultural files. It created over 10,000 theories about hidden messages. It even tried to find mathematical patterns in human music. Meanwhile, it failed to notice the actual threat, structural charges on the asteroid itself. We gave it too much useless information, Yuna explained. It couldn't tell what was important because everything seemed potentially important. Vector looked at his commanders. Some were shaking their heads in disbelief. Others were laughing. All of them looked amazed. This could actually work on a larger scale. It already is working, sir, Commander Wen said, pulling up new reports. 3 other Velkhari positions have reported similar disruptions. They're starting to second-guess every decision because they don't know if we're being serious or creating distractions. How many casualties did we take in this operation? Vector asked. None, sir. No injuries. No equipment losses. Just 1 transport and 15 people. For the first time in weeks, Vector smiled. Then we'll do it again. Hajun, you have authorization to expand your team, train more volunteers, show them how to fight with confusion instead of force. Yes, sir. As Hajun left the command center, Minho walked beside him. We just won a battle by reading poetry to the enemy. This war has become very strange. War has always been strange, Hajun said. We just forgot the